Chapter 32. The Ho'oponopono Seance. Mental Cleansing. In this Ho'oponopono seance, there would be the three of us and Heneli Ku. Since Elena was not related to Mr. Johnson, she would sit in at the seance and observe. Heneli Ku explained, "Since you two are relatives of the accused, I will ask the keeper of the ku'ula for mercy. You must remember before we start, I will set the pace, and all you have to do is to follow and answer the questions, and I will invoke in my prayer for forgiveness and humility. Before morning, if the answer is favorable, I will return the ku'ula with reverence and humility. Otherwise, I will have to wait for an answer." Mrs. Johnson asked Heneli Ku if she should prepare a dinner before he started, and he said to go ahead. After dinner, Mrs. Johnson told Domingo to excuse the four of us, that we were having a prayer meeting for Mr. Johnson. Domingo understood and took the little girl in another room. I sat with Mrs. Johnson. Elena sat by herself. Heneli Ku sat across from Mrs. Johnson and me. Before him was a white bowl, half full of water. On the side there were 3 green tea leaves and a tied yellow neckerchief. He untied and unfolded the neckerchief and brought out a red feather malo woven with olona bark around the waist to hold it in place. There was also a half coconut shell bowl, and wrapped in a piece of tapa was some Hawaiian salt. These were all the things he needed for the preparation of the seance. At 7 o'clock, the seance started. He unwrapped the tapa package and threw some of the salt in the bowl, saying, "The salt from the sea will cleanse the heart and mind and give us humility and forgiveness." Then he picked up 1 green tea leaf and dipped it in the bowl, and turning in all directions, he sprayed the salt water from the leaf. Then he took the second leaf and blessed the 3 of us. He then set the 2 leaves aside. Then, sitting with both legs crossed, he lifted up both arms and his head and prayed in Hawaiian, asking the Almighty Spirit to intercede in our behalf, to enlighten our minds so that our hearts and minds would be in unison to forgive without hesitation. He brought his hands down and bowed his head, and began to chant. The chant he used was mostly in alphabet. For example, akamu. I remember this distinctly. Later I asked him to let me have the words of the prayer, but he refused to give them to me, as this was his prayer to the ku'ula, and it was not for publication. While he was chanting, his words seemed to fade away. He was chanting to the ku'ula, asking that he be known of his true identity. During that time, he was in a state of a physical trance. He spoke, chanting the genealogy of the ku'ula and his keeper. The name of the keeper was Kala. During the trance, he was mentally in commune with the keeper, Kala. He stopped chanting. This woke him from his trance. Then, as soon as he had control of his thinking, he asked for a glass of water, which I gave him. He asked me to massage his neck and shoulders. This I did. He spoke to me. "It is a great strain on me. The keeper is a strong and persistent man. He demands the return of the ku'ula and a promise not to use the ku'ula. The taboo penalty is death." I did not understand. I told him, "If you speak instead of chanting, then I will understand." He said, "This chanting is mostly one kahuna to another kahuna. This is a language understood in their commune." During this time, Heneli Ku understood that Mr. Johnson would not be spared the ku'ula's wrath as set by the keeper. He said, "This is not the end. We need to search more in our heart and mind. This is my second phase to challenge." Heneli Ku said to Mrs. Johnson, I will ask the questions again, and you answer me and hold nothing back. Did you know your husband was planning to get the ku'ula when Kema told him where the ku'ula lay hidden?" Mrs. Johnson replied, "My husband did not say a word to me, but I could sense that he was trying to get it without my knowing. I wanted to ask him, and I know the consequences. But still he always talked to me about the school of fish. I should have stopped him at that time, but I kept quiet. I am just as guilty as he is. Now he is hurt, and I know I could have stopped him. I am sorry, and ask for forgiveness from my heart. This is all that I know." Peneliku turned to me and asked the same question. I replied, "He told me about the school of fish out in the ocean 3 miles away. I asked him why he didn't try with large nets, but he said it was impossible, but that someday he would get that school of fish. He never spoke to me of the ku'ula. I heard about the ku'ula from Kema. All I was interested in was the ku'ula's history." I understand that Mr. Johnson was trying to get him to disclose the hiding place of the ku'ula. The only time I knew he got the ku'ula was when he brought the ahole to Mr. Kupahu. We ate the ahole, and it was delicious. For this I am very sorry, from the bottom of my heart. If I knew that he wanted to get the ku'ula, I would have tried to persuade him not to. This is all I have to confess." Then he asked Elena, Mr. Kupahu's granddaughter, the same question. She replied, "The only time I knew was when Mr. Fat told me to clean and boil the ahole using Hawaiian salt. My grandfather Kupahu spoke to me when he received the ahole from Mr. Johnson. He said Mr. Johnson must have used the ku'ula to get the fish. At first he did not want to eat them, but later he relaxed and ate the fish. My grandfather and I are sorry and both ask forgiveness. This is all I can tell you." The answers received by Heneliku were satisfactory. He stood up and picked up the red malo and walked to the bathroom. When he returned, he had the red feather malo on. This time he put his coconut cup in front of him. He knelt down and bent over with his hands resting on the floor. He was praying and chanting. I could not understand what he was saying. I looked at the time. It was past midnight. Then he stood up, holding the coconut shell cup in his left hand. With his right hand, he started waving several times, and all at once it seemed as though he caught something in the air and squeezed it into his right palm. What I saw was like the substance of an egg flowing from the palm of his hand to the side of his wrist. I had seen this done when I was 10 years old, while I was sleeping at my grandfather's house at Pahoa. We all looked and did not say a word. When he was through, he took the tea leaves and wiped his hand. He put the leaves in the coconut shell. Then he took the remaining tea leaf and dipped it in the bowl of water and blessed us all. He said, "What you have seen, I had to kill the spirit of the keeper to relieve the taboo from Mr. Johnson. Now he is released from all obligation, and he will be well in about 3 weeks. Now it is up to the doctor to take care of him." He placed the last tea leaf in the coconut shell and walked to the bathroom and changed back to his clothing. He came back, folded his malo, and wrapped the salt in the tapa cloth. Then he took his yellow neckerchief and put the red malo, the tapa, and the coconut shell on it, and folded it and tied it in a square knot. Mrs. Johnson thanked Heneliku for helping her to dislodge the taboo curse from her husband. Elena and I also thanked him for his help. He said, "I will take the ku'ula back to the cave." Mrs. Johnson prepared a snack. We all sat at the table, had pie, and drank hot chocolate. While we were at the table, I asked Heneliku, "Did you see the spirit?" He replied, "I cannot see the keeper's spirit. I can feel that he is in the room." "What kind of feeling is it? Is it like a draft of air blowing around you?" I asked. He replied, "I hear a vibration moving around me. This vibration moves with speed. I have to use the palm of my hand to catch this vibration. This is the contact point where the vibration comes and rests. I was trained to do this at the split second. You saw my hand and the palm was open as if I was waving or trying to catch something unknown. While my arm is moving, the vibration of the spirit will try to rest in my palm. When that vibration contacted on my palm, my hand automatically closed and I captured the spirit, which is called uhane po'i. As I squeezed the substance, it flowed down my wrist. This is the death of the spirit. This is the sign of triumph. The taboo has been broken that releases the spiritual holding from Mr. Johnson. Whatever ails him will be cured through physical medication." We were up at 8 the next morning, Sunday, and breakfast was ready. It was a beautiful morning, and the ocean was calm. My only thought was the Ku'ula rock, and if the ahole fish were still there. I wanted to see once more, but hesitated because of the Ho'oponopono seance. We were still under restriction until Heneliku released us. All this time, our feelings were mutual with humility. He also asked that we have a light meal. In fact, we should fast until the seance is over, but since he had the upper hand, he could make such recommendations as he saw fit. He spoke to me. "There is one more to bargain for." I asked him to explain. "You see, the keeper has been exterminated in my palm before your eyes, but there are a few rebels who, at one time, tried to take over the Ku'ula o Makale. These are the ones who wanted to be the keeper. If I let this go, Mr. Johnson will have trouble later on." Then I asked him this vital question: "Can a layman do this kind of work and consider himself just as good as a kahuna?" He replied, "The answer is no. There is one good answer. After you watch me during the Ho'oponopono seance, you can consider yourself as good as I am, but you will have trouble later. In some cases, when there is no spirit involved, like family trouble, this is simple. I am glad I can read your mind, and I agree to your method of writing what you see and hear. The spoken words can be distorted." During the morning hour, I stayed close to him, just watching his facial expressions, and he went into a trance for about 7 minutes and then back to normal. I did not want to question him. I let him tell me all about what had happened. His facial expressions told me it was not an easy matter. This is how I saw it. If the spirit was in front of him, he could bargain with ease. The spirit was around him and he knew that. He could not see, but heard the low vibration. It sounded loud when near and faint when far off. When the vibration was loud, he went off into a trance. He began to commune. Sometimes I understood, but most of the time, the words were spoken were meaningless to me. This was the language of the kahuna when communing with the spirit unknown to the third party. This secret cannot be divulged. I remember, he told me these conversations were taboo, and if revealed, meant death to him. In my patient observation, I tried not to interfere with what he was doing. I waited until he came out of his trance and waited patiently. This would pay off. In this case, he was under a strain. As soon as he was relieved, he would tell me all. If there was too much aggression, he would refrain from telling me the important part. This was one teaching my mother exposed to me about the way of life with a kahuna, like Heneli Ku. He was gentle and kind, and the next minute he was a killer, because this was his training all his life. I was then only 30 years old and an aggressor, but I was only interested in getting the exact feeling of how a kahuna acts while he was bartering the life of one human being against a ku'ula's keeper, only a spirit, who by his power invokes death to those who defy his taboo that he made when he was alive. This was the mystery and hard for me to comprehend. There were times when he sat next to me and looked at me with the look of a father, trying to read my mind. His smile gave me a feeling of trust. By noon, he had had 2 engagements through mental telepathy. It was like holding a conference. To Heneli Ku, it was a strain on his body and mind at the age of 75, but he seemed to hold out. I asked him again, "Is anyone who is living now interested in the ku'ula o Makale?" He told me there were none, just a few who were rebels when they were alive, but the spirit lives on. These rebels kept him busy. He tried to convince them that if they forced the issue, he would exterminate them like he did the keeper of the ku'ula. He promised them it would be better that the ku'ula remain without a keeper, and there would be no taboo. Since the ku'ula o Makale is a meteorite, an ordinary rock without any spirit, he promised them he would return the ku'ula the following day at the rise of the morning sun. The spirits agreed to the proposal, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the Ho'oponopono seance ended. When Mrs. Johnson heard the message, she was so happy. She prepared lunch, which we all enjoyed. To me, it was an experience of a lifetime, seeing a real Ho'oponopono seance. Mrs. Johnson was anxious to hear by phone from the Pahala Hospital to substantiate her belief. The answer would be any time from then on. To Heneli Ku, it was his duty to protect the family when they were in need of help. There was no payment of money involved. It was just his love for them to see that they got the help, and at the same time, he was proud he had proven his ability as a kahuna ana when challenged. In the days gone by, when he sat in any case, it was with authority. But not anymore, and pretty soon there would be nothing left. He said to me, "What you have seen and heard that I have done and spoke are all real. I have done this for the love that is in my heart and for the family. You are going to write about this, and I will not be here to read it. But my spirit will help you, I promise." This was his promise to me. That night was like a real family reunion. Everybody was happy. After listening to the late news on the radio, we all went to bed. This was about 11 o'clock.